My name is Hassan, 32 years old, and I grew up in a typical American household that was anything but typical in how they treated their children. I was always the outsider while my sister Grace was the golden child. When she got married, my parents happily gave her $90,000 for her dream wedding. When I asked for help with mine, they looked me straight in the eyes and said, "You don't deserve any help." Today, I live in a $5 million house that my sister drove past recently. Before I begin this heartbreaking story, let me know where you're watching from, and hit that like button if you've ever felt the sting of family favoritism. Growing up in a middle-class suburb of Boston, our family seemed normal from the outside. My father, Martin, worked as an accountant at a respectable firm downtown. He was methodical, precise, and expected the same from his children, especially me. My mother, Deborah, taught 4th grade at the local elementary school. She had a warm smile for her students and my sister, but rarely for me. Grace was 4 years younger than me, with an infectious laugh that seemed to melt my parents' hearts in ways I never could. Our house was modest but comfortable, a 3-bedroom colonial with a small backyard where Dad would grill on summer weekends. We had family game nights on Fridays and went to church on Sundays. To neighbors and friends, we were the picture-perfect American family, but inside those walls, the dynamic was far more complex. From my earliest memories, there was an unspoken expectation that I had to excel at everything. When I brought home straight A's, my father would glance at my report card and simply nod. "That's what we expect from you, Hassan," he would say before turning his attention back to his newspaper. But when Grace brought home B's and C's, there would be celebrations and ice cream. "Look how hard she's trying," Mom would beam. The pattern continued throughout my childhood. For my 10th birthday, I received practical gifts, new school clothes, books, and a digital watch. 2 months later, for Grace's 6th birthday, she got a lavish party at the local recreation center with a bouncy castle, 30 guests, and a professional magician. When I asked why my celebration had been so much smaller, Mom brushed it off with, "You're older, Hassan. You understand that these things cost money." But it wasn't just about material things. It was the constant emotional favoritism that cut the deepest. When I was 12, I won the state science fair with a project on renewable energy. The competition was on the same day as Grace's dance recital. Both events started at different times, and they could have attended both. Instead, they chose her performance without hesitation, leaving me to accept my award with only my science teacher there to congratulate me. "Your sister needs our support," Dad explained when I expressed my disappointment. "You're self-sufficient, Hassan. We're proud of you, but you don't need us there." Those words became a recurring theme in our family dynamic. I was self-sufficient, independent, mature for my age, all code for "we don't need to be there for you." By high school, I had internalized this message. I stopped asking for their presence at debate competitions or track meets. I learned to celebrate my own victories and console myself after defeats. I built a wall around my heart, one reinforced by each birthday that was overshadowed by Grace's accomplishments, each achievement that went unacknowledged. When college applications came around, I set my sights on Harvard. My grades were perfect, my extracurriculars impressive, and my SAT scores in the top percentile. When the acceptance letter arrived, my parents' response was tepid at best. "That's going to be expensive," was my father's first comment. "You know we can't afford that." Yet 3 years later, when Grace decided to attend a private liberal arts college with tuition nearly as high as Harvard's, my parents took out a second mortgage on the house without hesitation. "Your sister needs a nurturing environment," Mom explained. "Besides, you got scholarships. You've always been able to take care of yourself." It was true that I had secured a partial scholarship, but it wasn't enough. Throughout my 4 years at Harvard, I worked 20 to 30 hours a week at the campus library and as a teaching assistant. I took extra courses during summer sessions to graduate early and save money. Many nights, I would finish my shift at the library at midnight, then study until 3 or 4 in the morning to maintain my GPA for my scholarship. Meanwhile, Grace called home weekly, asking for extra spending money for sorority events and spring break trips, which my parents always provided. "Your sister is building important social connections," Dad would say if I ever questioned this disparity. You're getting an education to be independent. Men need to stand on their own 2 feet. This gendered expectation became another recurring theme. Sons need to learn to provide, they would say. Daughters need protection and support. It was as if they were living in a previous century, not raising children in modern America. By the time I graduated, I was exhausted but proud. I had done it entirely on my own, working myself to the bone while maintaining academic excellence. At graduation, as I watched other families taking photos and celebrating with their children, my parents spent most of their time talking about Grace's accomplishments to anyone who would listen. She had just been named to the dean's list for the first time, and somehow that overshadowed my summa cum laude Harvard degree. I told myself I didn't care. I convinced myself that their approval didn't matter. But deep down, there was still that little boy who just wanted his parents to be proud of him, to value him as much as they valued his sister. After graduating from Harvard with a degree in software engineering, I accepted a position at a small tech startup in Cambridge. The salary wasn't impressive, but the equity options seemed promising, and I was excited about the opportunity to build something from the ground up. The company, DataSync Technologies, specialized in cloud-based solutions for small businesses. As one of the first 10 employees, I wore multiple hats, coding the back-end systems during the day, helping with customer support in the evenings, and occasionally even making coffee runs when we worked through the night on deadline. My tiny studio apartment was barely 600 square feet, with just enough room for a bed, a desk, and a small kitchen area. But it was mine, paid for entirely with my own earnings, and that gave me a sense of pride that no parental approval could match. The startup culture was intense. 14-hour days were common, and weekends were often spent hunched over my laptop, fixing bugs or implementing new features. My social life was practically non-existent, but I didn't mind. Work became my refuge, a place where effort was recognized and rewarded based on merit, not family dynamics. 6 months into my time at DataSync, the company hired a new marketing director named Laura. She was 29, 3 years older than me, with a sharp mind and an even sharper wit. The first time we interacted was during a company-wide meeting where she systematically dismantled the CEO's proposed marketing strategy and presented a much more effective alternative. I was impressed by her confidence and clarity of thought. Our paths began to cross more frequently as the company grew. We were assigned to work together on a project to revamp the user experience of our main product. Laura handled the customer research and messaging while I implemented the technical changes. Late nights at the office led to takeout dinners, which led to conversations that extended far beyond work. Laura had grown up in Seattle with parents who pushed her to excel but also celebrated her achievements. Her stories about family game nights where everyone cheered each other on and holiday gatherings filled with laughter sounded like fiction to me. When I shared some of my own childhood experiences, her reaction was both validating and eye-opening. "That's not normal, Hassan," she said one night, as we sat surrounded by empty Chinese food containers. "Parents are supposed to support all their children equally. What happened to you was favoritism, and it's a form of emotional neglect." No one had ever named it so directly before. Hearing it from Laura, someone I respected tremendously, made me see my childhood in a new light. It wasn't that I wasn't worthy of love or attention. It was that my parents had failed in their responsibility to provide it equally. As we worked together over the next few months, our professional relationship evolved into friendship and then into something more. Laura was different from anyone I'd ever met. She didn't just listen. She understood. She saw my worth without me having to prove it constantly. For the first time in my life, I felt truly valued for who I was, not what I could achieve. On our first official date, we went to a small Italian restaurant in the North End. Laura wore a blue dress that matched her eyes, and I remember thinking she was the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen. We talked for hours about everything from our favorite books to our career aspirations. With her, conversation flowed naturally, without the constant self-censoring I'd grown accustomed to around my family. Our relationship progressed steadily over the next 2 years. We moved in together after 12 months, renting a larger apartment closer to downtown. Laura's marketing strategies helped DataSync secure several major clients, while my work on the product earned me a promotion to lead developer. We were both thriving professionally and personally. When I decided to propose, I spent weeks finding the perfect ring, a sapphire surrounded by small diamonds that reminded me of her eyes. I proposed during a weekend trip to Cape Cod, on a quiet beach at sunset. When she said yes, I felt a happiness I hadn't known was possible. That night, as we celebrated with champagne in our hotel room, Laura asked about meeting my family. I had been avoiding this inevitability, but now it couldn't be postponed any longer. Reluctantly, I arranged a dinner at my parents' house the following month. The evening went exactly as I had feared. My mother's welcome was polite but cool. She asked Laura superficial questions about her job and hometown, but showed no real interest in her answers. My father was slightly more engaged, until he discovered that Laura's father was a high school teacher rather than a professional. Throughout dinner, they managed to mention Grace and her boyfriend Robert no fewer than 15 times. Robert came from a wealthy family that owned a chain of luxury car dealerships across New England. According to my parents, he was such a catch, and exactly the kind of man we always hoped Grace would find. The subtle digs continued all evening. Hassan was always so serious as a child, Mom told Laura over dessert. We worried he'd never find someone willing to put up with his intensity. Or my father's comment. Laura seems very career-focused. I hope that won't interfere with family plans down the road. On the drive home, Laura was uncharacteristically quiet. When I finally asked what she was thinking, she took a deep breath before answering. They don't think I'm good enough for you, she said. Which is ironic, because they also don't think you're good enough. Period. It's like they have this bizarre contradiction where you're simultaneously beneath them and too good for me. Her assessment was painfully accurate. My parents had spent my entire life making me feel inadequate, yet somehow also expected me to marry up socially and economically, as if that would reflect well on them. I'm so sorry, I said, reaching for her hand. You deserved a better welcome than that. Laura squeezed my fingers and gave me a sad smile. Don't apologize for them. But Hassan, this is a pattern. They've been treating you this way your whole life. At some point, you might need to consider whether having them in our future is healthy for either of us. Her words stayed with me for days afterward. I had always accepted my parents' behavior as normal, or at least unchangeable, but seeing it through Laura's eyes made me realize just how toxic it truly was. Still, they were my family. Could I really contemplate a future without them? The answer would come sooner than I expected, and in a way that would force me to make that very decision. After our engagement, Laura and I began discussing what kind of wedding we wanted. We both agreed that an extravagant ceremony wasn't our style. We'd rather put that money toward our future, a down payment on a house, seed funding for a business idea we'd been developing, or simply investing for our retirement. What about $25,000 for a small ceremony with just close friends and family? Laura suggested one evening as we sat at our kitchen table, spreadsheets and wedding magazines spread out before us. We could have it at that botanical garden you like, with maybe 75 guests maximum. The figure seemed reasonable. We could afford it ourselves, but would need to dip into our savings. While I was hesitant to ask my parents for help, Laura gently encouraged me to at least have the conversation. Even if they only contribute a small amount, it would be a gesture of support for our marriage, she said, and you should give them the opportunity to be involved. I knew she was right, though I dreaded the conversation. The following Sunday, we drove to my parents' house for their regular family dinner. Grace was there with Robert, showing off her new tennis bracelet, a just-because gift from her boyfriend of 8 months. After the meal, when Grace and Robert went outside to look at his new BMW, I asked if I could speak with my parents privately. Laura gave my hand a supportive squeeze as we sat down in the living room. As you know, Laura and I are planning our wedding for next spring, I began, trying to keep my voice steady. We're thinking of something small and meaningful at the Botanical Gardens downtown. My mother nodded distractedly, her eyes on her phone as she scrolled through what appeared to be resort websites. We've budgeted about $25,000 for the whole thing, I continued. And while we can cover it ourselves, we wanted to ask if you might be willing to contribute something toward it, as is traditionally done by the parents of the Hassan, my father interrupted, lowering his newspaper. You've always been independent. It's one of your defining traits. Why start asking for handouts now? The term handout stung, but I pressed on. It's not about needing the money. It's about your participation in this important moment in my life. My mother finally looked up from her phone. Well, to be perfectly honest, we're setting aside money for Grace's wedding. You know how girls dream about their special day. We want to make sure she can have everything she's always wanted. But Grace isn't even engaged yet, Laura pointed out, her tone polite but firm. My father's expression hardened. It's only a matter of time. Robert is from a good family. They have expectations about these things. A proper society wedding costs money. And our wedding doesn't deserve the same consideration? I asked, feeling a familiar knot forming in my stomach. You don't need our help, Hassan, my mother said with a dismissive wave. You've always been so proud of doing things on your own. Why change that now? The conversation continued in circles for another 20 minutes, with my parents offering various excuses. They were preparing for retirement. They had already helped me through college, a blatant lie. They always knew I would marry someone practical who wouldn't want an elaborate wedding. By the time we left, it was clear no help would be forthcoming. The drive home was silent, both Laura and I processing what had just happened. I'm sorry, I finally said as we pulled into our apartment complex. I shouldn't have gotten your hopes up. Laura reached over and touched my cheek. This isn't about the money, Hassan. It's about the fact that your parents don't value our relationship the way they should. And I'm starting to think they've never valued you the way parents should value their child. A month later, we received a group text from Grace announcing her engagement to Robert. My parents immediately called a family dinner to celebrate the news. When we arrived, the dining room was decorated with engagement-themed banners and balloons. An expensive bottle of champagne was chilling in an ice bucket. My mother was glowing with excitement as she showed us the 3-carat diamond on Grace's finger. Robert proposed at sunset on his family's yacht. Grace gushed. It was so romantic. Throughout dinner, my parents couldn't stop discussing wedding plans. They had already researched venues and were considering the Ocean View Estate, an exclusive seaside property that rented for $30,000 for a weekend. We're thinking next June would be perfect, my mother said. That gives us just over a year to plan everything. And don't worry about the budget, sweetheart, my father added, patting Grace's hand. We've been saving for this. We can set aside $90,000 for the wedding itself, and we'll handle the honeymoon as our special gift. I nearly choked on my water. $90,000? My mother nodded proudly. We want it to be perfect. Robert's family knows a lot of important people. This is a chance for Grace to have the fairy tale she deserves. Under the table, Laura squeezed my knee, a silent reminder to stay calm. But I couldn't let this go. When Laura and I asked for help with our wedding, you said you were saving for retirement and couldn't spare anything, I said, fighting to keep my voice level. An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. Grace looked confused, glancing between me and our parents. Robert shifted in his seat, suddenly very interested in his dessert. That was different, my father finally said. Grace needs our help. You and Laura are both working professionals. You don't need assistance. It's not about need, I countered. It's about treating your children equally. My mother's expression hardened. We are treating you equally, Hassan. We're giving you both what you need. Grace needs our financial support. You need to learn to be the man of your household. What is that supposed to mean? Laura asked, her patience visibly wearing thin. It means, my father said, looking directly at me rather than Laura, that a man should be able to provide for his wife. If you can't afford the wedding you want, perhaps you should wait until you can, or choose something even simpler. The implication was clear. If I was a real man, I wouldn't be asking for their help. And more disturbing, they didn't consider Laura worth investing in. Grace, perhaps sensing the tension, attempted to change the subject. Hassan, would you consider being one of Robert's groomsmen? And Laura, I'd love for you to help me choose the floral arrangements. It was a transparent attempt to smooth things over, to pull us into the excitement of her wedding while ignoring the blatant favoritism on display. For a moment, I considered letting it go, falling back into the family dynamic I'd endured my entire life. But as I looked at Laura, who had shown me what unconditional support actually felt like, I knew I couldn't keep pretending this was normal or acceptable. "I think we should go," I said quietly, placing my napkin on the table. "Congratulations on your engagement, Grace. I'm happy for you." As Laura and I drove home in silence, I felt something shift inside me. This wasn't just about money for a wedding. This was about a lifetime of being treated as less worthy, less deserving of love and support. And for the first time, I was ready to confront it head on. The next morning, I called my parents and asked to meet with them alone. I needed to have this conversation without Grace or Laura present, to speak directly about patterns that had shaped my entire life. We met at a coffee shop near their house, neutral territory where neither of us would feel too comfortable or in control. My father arrived first, checking his watch repeatedly as if this meeting was an inconvenience in his busy schedule. My mother joined us 5 minutes later, already looking defensive. "I'll get straight to the point," I began after we'd settled with our drinks. "I need to understand why you've always treated Grace and me so differently." My father sighed heavily, the way he always did when he thought I was being dramatic. "We haven't treated you differently, Hassan. We've treated you according to your needs and personalities. $90,000 for Grace's wedding and nothing for mine isn't different treatment?" I asked. "Your sister needs more support than you do," my mother said. "She's always been more delicate, more emotional. You've always been strong and independent." "Because I had to be," I replied. "From the time I was a child, you made it clear that I couldn't count on you the way Grace could." My father's expression hardened. "That's ridiculous. We provided everything you needed. Food and shelter, yes. But what about emotional support? What about attending my science fairs or debate competitions? What about celebrating my achievements instead of taking them for granted?" "You're a man, Hassan," my father said, leaning forward. "Men need to learn self-reliance. We were preparing you for the real world. By making me feel unwanted? By making me work through college while paying Grace's full tuition?" My mother reached across the table as if to touch my hand, then thought better of it. "We always knew you would be fine. You've always been so capable. That's not a reason to withhold support," I said, feeling decades of hurt rising to the surface. "That's like saying you only help the child who struggles and ignore the one who works hard." "We're not having this conversation right now," my father declared, pushing back his chair. "You've always had a tendency to dramatize things, Hassan. If you can't afford the wedding you want, that's not our problem. A real man would provide for his wife without coming to his parents with his hand out." My mother nodded in agreement. "Grace needs to be taken care of. She's always needed special attention. You, on the other hand, you don't deserve special treatment. You've never needed it." The words hung in the air between us. You don't deserve special treatment. You don't deserve. After a lifetime of feeling this sentiment without hearing it spoken aloud, there it was, finally in the open. "I see," I said quietly, a strange calm settling over me. "Thank you for being honest." "Now, about Grace's wedding," my mother continued, apparently thinking the matter was settled. "She was hoping you might help with some of the technical aspects, setting up a website and such." I stood up, gathering my coat. "I don't think I'll be involved in Grace's wedding planning. In fact, I think it's best if we take some time apart. All of us." My father scoffed. "Don't be childish, Hassan. Family disagreements happen. You can't just walk away." "I'm not being childish," I replied. "For the first time in my life, I'm recognizing that I deserve better than this. I deserve parents who value me as much as they value my sister. Since that's not possible, I need to protect myself." I left them sitting there, my mother calling after me as I walked out the door. In my car, I sat for several minutes, expecting to feel grief or anger. Instead, I felt a profound sense of relief, as if I'd finally put down a burden I'd been carrying my entire life. When I got home, Laura was waiting. One look at my face told her everything she needed to know. "They didn't listen," she said. "It wasn't a question. They said I don't deserve their help," I told her, the words still stinging as I spoke them. "That men should provide for their wives, and Grace needs special treatment because she's more delicate." Laura pulled me into a hug, tight and protective. That's not how family is supposed to work, Hassan. That's not how love works. We spent the evening talking about what this meant for our future. Would we still invite my parents to our wedding? Would we maintain contact at all? What about Grace, who was caught in the middle but had always benefited from the dynamic? I think you should write them a letter, Laura suggested. Explain exactly how you feel and what you need from them if they want to be part of our lives going forward. That night, I drafted an email to my parents. I explained how their favoritism had affected me, how it continued to impact our relationship, and why I needed space. I didn't attack or accuse. I simply stated facts and feelings. Until you can recognize and acknowledge this pattern, I wrote in closing, I need to step back from our relationship. I'm getting married to an amazing woman who has shown me what unconditional support actually looks like. I deserve that kind of love, and I won't expose myself or her to anything less. The next day, I changed my phone number. I blocked my parents on social media but left a channel open to Grace through email. I didn't want to cut her off completely, recognizing that she was both a beneficiary and, in some ways, a victim of our parents' dysfunctional approach to parenting. The weeks that followed were strange. There were moments when habit made me reach for the phone to call home, followed by the realization that home was no longer a place I had access to. There was grief, certainly, but also a growing sense of freedom. For the first time in my life, I wasn't measuring myself against my parents' impossible standards or trying to earn love that should have been freely given. Laura stood by me through all of it, never pushing but always supporting. Family is what we make it, she told me one night as we lay in bed. The people who truly love you, who show up for you, who celebrate your joy and comfort your pain, those are your real family, whether you share DNA or not. With each passing day, I came to believe she was right. Family wasn't an obligation, it was a choice. And I was choosing to surround myself with people who valued me for exactly who I was. Our wedding day dawned clear and bright, a perfect spring Saturday at the Botanical Gardens. Without my parents' contribution, we'd scaled back slightly on some details, but the essentials remained the same. An intimate ceremony surrounded by people who genuinely cared about us. Laura was radiant in a simple white dress that skimmed her curves and caught the light as she moved. When I saw her walking down the aisle, escorted by her beaming father, I felt a momentary pang of sadness that my own parents had chosen not to be there. I'd sent them an invitation out of courtesy, but received only a terse response from my mother. We'll have to see if we can make it. Grace's wedding planning is taking up so much of our time. They didn't come, of course. Their empty seats in the front row were a visible reminder of their absence, but somehow it hurt less than I'd expected. Perhaps because I was surrounded by so many people who were genuinely happy to be there, celebrating our love without conditions or comparisons. To my surprise, Grace did attend. She came alone, without Robert or our parents, slipping into the ceremony just before it began. During the reception, she approached us with a small gift box and an uncertain smile. I know Mom and Dad can be difficult, she said, her eyes downcast. I'm sorry they couldn't see past their issues to be here for you. Coming from Grace, who had benefited from our parents' favoritism her entire life, the acknowledgement meant something. The gift was a pair of vintage cufflinks that had belonged to our grandfather, a man who had always treated me and Grace with equal affection before he passed away when we were young. He would have wanted you to have these, Grace said. And for what it's worth, I think what Mom and Dad are doing is wrong. I've tried to talk to them about it, but she trailed off, and I nodded, understanding. Our parents weren't likely to change their perspective based on anything Grace or I said. Their worldview was too firmly entrenched. Thank you for coming, I told her, genuinely touched by the gesture. It means a lot. The rest of the wedding was perfect in its imperfection. Laura's college roommate gave a slightly tipsy but heartfelt toast. One of the flower arrangements toppled during the first dance. The cake was a bit dry, but there was so much laughter, so much genuine joy in the room, that these small hiccups only added to the authenticity of the day. As Laura and I swayed together during the last dance, her head resting on my shoulder, I realized I'd never felt more at peace. We had created this moment on our terms, surrounded by love that asked nothing in return. What are you thinking? Laura whispered. That I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, I replied. After a brief honeymoon in Vermont, we returned to our apartment and our jobs at DataSync. But something had shifted for both of us. The company was growing, bringing in new layers of management that were changing the culture we'd once loved. Laura's innovative marketing ideas were being sidelined by more conservative approaches, while my technical expertise was being channeled into maintaining existing systems rather than building new ones. One night, as we sat on our small balcony sharing a bottle of wine, Laura turned to me with a gleam in her eye. "What if we started our own company?" she asked. "You're the best developer I know, and I understand what businesses actually need. We could create something that truly helps small businesses compete with the big corporations." The idea had crossed my mind before, but hearing Laura articulate it made it seem suddenly possible, even inevitable. We spent the rest of the evening brainstorming ideas, sketching potential business models on the back of a pizza box. 2 weeks later, we both gave notice at DataSync. We had enough savings to sustain us for 6 months without income, and Laura had already secured a small consulting contract that would provide some cash flow while we built our product. Our apartment became our office. We set up desks in the living room, with whiteboards covering one wall and sticky notes on another. Days blended into nights as we worked to bring our vision to life, a comprehensive platform that would help small businesses manage everything from inventory to customer relationships, with powerful analytics that were typically only available to large corporations. The early months were challenging. We lived on ramen and coffee, worked 16-hour days, and sometimes wondered if we'd made a terrible mistake. But there was also an exhilaration to building something from nothing, to making every decision based on our values and vision rather than someone else's. 4 months in, we had a minimum viable product ready for testing. Laura leveraged her professional network to find 5 small businesses willing to use our software for free in exchange for detailed feedback. The response was enthusiastic, with users particularly impressed by the intuitive interface and powerful reporting tools. With this validation, we began approaching angel investors. Our first pitch was a disaster. We were nervous. Our financial projections were overly optimistic, and we couldn't clearly articulate our competitive advantage. We left the meeting deflated, but determined to improve. Laura spent the next week refining our pitch deck, while I gathered more concrete data on our test users' results. Our second pitch, to a different investor, went better but still resulted in a no. The third one, however, landed. A veteran tech entrepreneur named Sofia Rodriguez saw the potential in what we were building and offered us $200,000 in seed funding for a 15% stake in the company. With this investment, we were able to move out of our apartment into a small office space and hire our first 2 employees, a front-end developer named Marcus and a customer success specialist named Nadia. Our company, which we named Catalyst, was officially launched. The next 6 months were a whirlwind of growth. Our client base expanded from 5 test users to 50 paying customers. We secured a partnership with an accounting software company that brought in another 100 users. Laura's marketing strategy focused on educational content that demonstrated the real-world impact of our tools began to gain traction in industry publications. By the end of our first year in business, we had 15 employees, a proper office in a converted warehouse space downtown, and were breaking even financially. More importantly, we were building something we believed in, something that was helping real businesses grow and thrive. On the first anniversary of Catalyst's official launch, Laura and I took our team out for a celebration dinner. Surrounded by these talented, passionate people who had chosen to join our mission, I felt a sense of belonging that had eluded me throughout my childhood and early adulthood. "To Catalyst," Laura said, raising her glass for a toast. "And to all of you who are making our vision a reality." As glasses clinked and conversations flowed around the table, I caught Laura's eye across the room. She smiled, and in that smile was everything: partnership, pride, love, and the shared knowledge that we were building something meaningful together. That night, as we walked home hand in hand, Laura turned to me with an expression I'd come to recognize. She had something important to share. "I've been waiting for the right moment to tell you," she said, her voice soft in the cool evening air. "I'm pregnant." Joy surged through me. unexpected and overwhelming. We had talked about having children someday, but with the business demanding so much of our time and energy, we'd agreed to wait a few years. Life, apparently, had other plans. "Are you happy?" Laura asked, searching my face. I pulled her into my arms, lifting her slightly off the ground in my excitement. "Happier than I've ever been," I told her, and it was the absolute truth. As our company grew, so did our family. Laura worked through most of her pregnancy, adjusting her schedule only in the final weeks before our son Noah was born. We converted the second bedroom of our apartment into a nursery, painting the walls a soft green and filling the bookshelves with stories we couldn't wait to read aloud. When Noah arrived, tiny and perfect with Laura's blue eyes and my dark hair, the world shifted again. Here was a new kind of love, fierce and protective in a way I hadn't known was possible. As I held him in those first days, I made a silent promise. He would never question his worth or his place in our hearts. He would know, every day of his life, that he was valued and loved exactly as he was. With a new baby and a rapidly growing company, we needed more space. We began looking for a house, something with room for our family to expand, and an office for the occasional work-from-home day. What we found exceeded our wildest expectations. A modern architectural masterpiece overlooking the water, with floor-to-ceiling windows, 5 bedrooms, and a dedicated home office suite. The price tag was eye-watering. $5 million, far more than we had planned to spend. But Catalyst had recently closed a major funding round, valuing the company at over $100 million. Our equity was now worth enough to afford this house and still have plenty of cushion for the future. We moved in when Noah was 4 months old, still marveling at the turn our lives had taken, from a cramped apartment and ramen dinners to this spectacular home in just over 2 years. It wasn't just about the material upgrade, though. It was about building a life on our own terms, creating success that was measured by our standards rather than anyone else's. As I stood on the balcony of our new home, watching the sunset with my son in my arms and my wife by my side, I felt a deep sense of peace. Whatever happened with my parents, whatever childhood wounds I still carried, I had created something beautiful and meaningful from that pain. And perhaps that was the greatest victory of all. 2 years after launching Catalyst, our company had grown beyond anything Laura and I had initially imagined. We now employed over 100 people across 3 offices, with clients ranging from local boutiques to international corporations looking to streamline their operations. The software platform we'd built had expanded to include advanced AI-driven analytics, customizable modules for different industries, and an app marketplace where third-party developers could create specialized tools. Business magazines began featuring Catalyst in their companies to watch sections. I was invited to speak at industry conferences about entrepreneurship and innovation. Laura led panels on marketing for tech startups and the importance of user experience in software design. We were becoming known not just for our product but for our company culture, collaborative, inclusive, and focused on genuine impact rather than just profit. With each new milestone, I couldn't help but think about my parents and the irony of our situation. They had spent my entire life preparing me to stand on my own, never imagining that I would stand this tall. Our company was now valued at over $300 million on paper. Laura and I owned 40% between us, making us, at least on paper, centimillionaires. Our personal life was equally fulfilling. Noah was growing into a curious, joyful toddler who filled our days with wonder and laughter. Our home, once feeling too large for just the 3 of us, now rang with the sounds of his footsteps as he explored every corner. Laura and I had settled into a partnership that balanced work and family, each supporting the other's goals while nurturing our shared vision. Through mutual friends and occasional emails with Grace, I heard bits and pieces about my parents and their lives. Grace's wedding had been everything they'd hoped for: elaborate, expensive, and featured in a local society magazine. My mother had apparently carried the issue with her for weeks, showing it to anyone who would look. But beneath the glossy surface, things weren't going as planned. Robert's family business, the chain of luxury car dealerships, was struggling in the changing automotive landscape. Several locations had closed, and there were rumors of financial trouble. Grace had put her career as an interior designer on hold when she married Robert, expecting to live the socialite life her mother had always envisioned for her. Now, with money tightening, that dream was fading. I felt no satisfaction in their difficulties. Despite everything, Grace was still my sister, and I didn't wish hardship on her or Robert. When I heard through our email correspondence that she was pregnant with their first child, I sent a generous gift basket and a sincere note of congratulations. Some bonds, it seemed, couldn't be completely severed, even with all the hurt between us. One Sunday afternoon, as Laura and I were playing with Noah in our backyard garden, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. Normally, I would have let it go to voicemail, but something made me answer. "Is this Hassan?" a familiar voice asked. It was Grace, sounding uncharacteristically subdued. "Yes, it's me," I replied, moving toward the house for some privacy. "Is everything okay?" There was a pause then. "I'm not sure how to say this, so I'll just say it. I drove by your house yesterday. I didn't know it was yours until I saw you out front with your son." I hadn't known Grace had any reason to be in our neighborhood, but I wasn't entirely surprised she'd recognized the house. It was distinctive enough to draw attention. "It's a beautiful home," I said neutrally. It's incredible," she replied, her voice catching slightly. "Hassan, I had no idea you were doing so well. Robert and I have been struggling, and Mom and Dad have been helping us financially, but even they couldn't afford anything like what you have." There was an awkward silence. I wasn't sure what she wanted from me. Congratulations? An explanation? Assistance? "I called Mom right after I saw your house," Grace continued. "I was upset. I asked her why you had that beautiful mansion while Robert and I are having to sell our condo and move in with his parents temporarily. Do you know what she said?" I didn't answer, but Grace didn't seem to expect me to. She said it wasn't possible, that you must be renting, or that it was your wife's family's money. She refused to believe that you could be that successful on your own. Grace's voice hardened. "Even with the evidence right in front of me, she couldn't admit that you've done well without their help, without their approval." I leaned against the wall of our home office, suddenly feeling the weight of all the years of dismissal and doubt. "And what do you believe, Grace?" She sighed heavily. "I believe I've been part of a system that was unfair to you. I believe I accepted their favoritism because it benefited me, without questioning what it was doing to you. And I believe," her voice broke slightly, "I believe I owe you an apology." It wasn't what I had expected. In all the scenarios I'd imagined of reconnecting with my family, Grace offering a genuine acknowledgement of her role had never been one of them. "Thank you for saying that," I said quietly. "It means a lot." "There's more," Grace continued. "Mom and Dad want to reconnect. They've been talking about it for months, but didn't know how to reach out. Now, after seeing your house," she trailed off. "Now that they know I'm wealthy, they're interested in a relationship?" I couldn't keep the bitterness from my voice. "It's not like that," Grace protested, but without much conviction. "They miss you. They've been following your company's success online. Dad keeps articles about Catalyst in a folder in his desk." I wasn't sure what to make of this information. Had my parents genuinely had a change of heart, or were they simply attracted to the status my success now represented? "I need to think about this, Grace," I said finally. "I can't just pretend the past didn't happen." "I understand," she replied, "but will you at least consider seeing them? They're still your parents, Hassan, and they're getting older." After we hung up, I sat in my office for a long time, looking out at the view of the bay. Laura found me there, gently placing her hand on my shoulder. "Grace?" she asked. We knew each other so well now that she could read the situation without explanation. I nodded, then shared the details of our conversation. Laura listened without interrupting, her expression thoughtful. "What do you want to do?" she asked when I'd finished. "I don't know," I admitted. "Part of me wants to keep that door firmly closed. They had their chance to be part of our lives, and they chose not to be. But another part still wants their approval," Laura finished for me. "Even after everything. That's normal, Hassan. They're your parents." Over the next few days, emails began arriving from my parents. First my mother, with a subject line of, "We miss you." Then my father, more formal, "Request to meet." Both expressed regret for any misunderstandings and a desire to be part of our lives again. Neither contained an actual apology or acknowledgement of the real issues between us. I showed the emails to Laura, who read them with a frown. "They're still not getting it, are they?" she observed. "They're treating this like a simple disagreement, not years of emotional neglect." She was right, of course. The emails were full of platitudes about family being important and life being too short for estrangement, but empty of any real reckoning with their behavior. A week after Grace's call, I received another email, this one from Robert. It was surprisingly direct. His family's business was in serious trouble, and he was looking for investors to help them restructure and transition to a more sustainable model. He thought of me immediately, given Catalyst's success and my family connection. So there it was. At least one motivation for the sudden interest in reconnection was financial. I wasn't surprised, but the confirmation still stung. I drafted and deleted multiple responses to my parents' emails, unsure of what I wanted to say or what outcome I hoped for. Finally, I decided that any meaningful resolution would require a face-to-face conversation. I arranged to meet Grace for coffee first, wanting to gauge the situation before potentially exposing Laura and Noah to my parents' toxicity. Grace arrived at the cafe looking tired but genuinely pleased to see me. Her pregnancy was showing, her hand resting protectively on the small bump as she sat down across from me. "Thank you for meeting me," she said. "I wasn't sure you would. I'm still figuring out how I feel about all this," I told her honestly. "But I wanted to hear more from you first." Grace nodded, stirring her decaf absently. "Things have been difficult. Robert's family business is failing, and we've been relying on Mom and Dad more than we should. They've remortgaged their house to help us, but it's not enough." She looked up at me with tears in her eyes. "I never thought I'd be in this position. I was supposed to be the success story." There was no satisfaction in seeing my sister's distress, only a sad recognition of how our parents' favoritism had ultimately failed to prepare her for life's realities. "I'm sorry you're going through this," I said, and meant it. "But I need to know, is reconnecting with me just about accessing my financial resources? Because if it is, we can have that conversation directly without pretending it's about family healing." Grace flushed, looking down at her hands. "I can't pretend the thought hasn't crossed everyone's mind. But it's more than that, at least for me. Seeing your beautiful house, realizing how successful you've become despite everything, it made me question so much about our family dynamic, about who Mom and Dad trained me to be versus who you became on your own." We talked for over 2 hours, delving into childhood memories and adult realizations. Grace admitted that she'd always known on some level that the treatment was unequal, but had accepted it because it benefited her. I shared how it had shaped my self-worth and my approach to relationships. It wasn't an easy conversation, but it felt necessary and, in its way, healing. By the end, I had decided to meet with my parents, but on my terms. I would host them at my home, with Laura present. I wanted them to see the life I had built without them, to understand that any relationship moving forward would be on an equal footing, not with them as the all-powerful parents and me as the child seeking approval. The meeting was set for the following Sunday. As the day approached, I found myself increasingly anxious, reviewing old interactions and preparing responses to potential scenarios. Laura, ever my anchor, reminded me that I was no longer the powerless child in this dynamic. "You've created an extraordinary life," she told me the night before, "one built on genuine connections and mutual respect. Remember that tomorrow, no matter what happens with your parents." When my parents' car pulled into our circular driveway the next day, I was ready, or as ready as I could be to face the people who had shaped so much of my understanding of love and worth, for better and for worse. The moment my parents stepped into our home, I could see the shock register on their faces. My father's eyes widened as he took in the soaring ceilings, the wall of windows overlooking the bay, the tasteful but clearly expensive furnishings. My mother's gaze darted around as if trying to assess the value of everything she saw. "Welcome," Laura said smoothly, stepping forward to greet them. She was the picture of gracious hostility, extending just enough warmth to meet social expectations, but not an ounce more. "Please, come through to the living room. We've prepared some refreshments." They followed silently, my father's hand at my mother's elbow, as if steering her through unfamiliar territory. In a way, I suppose it was. This world, my world, was entirely unknown to them. Noah was with a babysitter for the afternoon. Laura and I had agreed that this first meeting should be adults only, protecting our son from potential tension. As we settled into the living room, with its panoramic views and contemporary artwork, an awkward silence descended. "Your home is impressive," my father finally said, his voice carefully neutral. "Thank you," I replied. "We were fortunate to find it when we did. The market in this area has only gone up since then." My mother fidgeted with her purse strap. "Grace told us you've done well with your company. Some kind of computer business?" It was such a deliberate understatement of Catalyst's success that I almost laughed. My parents had always been masters of minimizing my achievements. "Catalyst provides enterprise software solutions for businesses of all sizes," Laura explained, her marketing background evident in the smooth description. "We currently serve over 2,000 clients globally and employ 135 people. Last year's revenue was just under $70 million. She delivered these facts without bragging, simply stating the reality of our business. My mother's eyes widened slightly, while my father's expression remained carefully controlled. "We've been following your progress," he said, gesturing vaguely. "Very impressive." "Have you?" I asked, unable to keep the skepticism from my voice. "Because in your emails, you didn't mention anything about my professional life, just that you missed having your son around." My mother reached for a cookie from the tray Laura had set out. "Of course we've missed you, Hassan. Family is the most important thing." "Is it?" I leaned forward slightly, because I distinctly remember being told that I didn't deserve your help or support, that Grace needed special treatment while I needed to be a man and stand on my own. My father shifted uncomfortably. "Perhaps we expressed ourselves poorly. We always believed in your abilities, Hassan. We knew you would succeed." "That's not the same as supporting me," I replied. "It's not the same as valuing me." Laura placed her hand over mine, a silent show of solidarity. My parents noticed the gesture, my mother's gaze lingering on our intertwined fingers. "We may have made mistakes," my father conceded, surprising me with even this modest acknowledgement. "But our intentions were good. We wanted to raise strong, independent children." "One child," I corrected. "You wanted one strong, independent child. The other one got $90,000 for a wedding and constant emotional support." My mother's face flushed. "Grace needed more guidance. She wasn't as naturally capable as you." "So you're saying you deliberately gave me less because I was doing well on my own?" I asked, the inherent contradiction finally laid bare. "Do you realize how backward that is? How it taught me that succeeding only gets you abandoned, while struggling gets you love and attention." My parents exchanged glances, seemingly at a loss for how to respond. This conversation wasn't following the script they had prepared for, which I suspected involved more reminiscing about good times and less direct confrontation of painful truths. "We understand that Robert is having some financial difficulties," Laura said, changing the subject slightly. "Grace mentioned he might be interested in discussing potential investment opportunities." My father straightened, clearly more comfortable on this terrain. "Yes, the automotive industry is changing rapidly. Robert's family business needs to adapt, but that requires capital." He hesitated, then added, "We thought, given your success and the family connection, you might be interested in helping." There it was, the real purpose behind this reconciliation attempt. Not a genuine desire to heal our relationship, but access to my resources. "I might be," I said carefully, "but as a business decision, not a family obligation. If Robert has a solid plan for transforming the dealerships to adapt to the changing market, I'd be willing to review it. But it would be an investment with terms, not a gift." My mother looked disappointed, but my father nodded. "That's fair. Robert has been developing a strategy. He can send you the details." A silence fell over the room again, heavier this time. The pretense of a purely emotional reconciliation had been stripped away, leaving the transactional nature of their interest exposed. "You know," I said finally, "I spent most of my life trying to earn your approval, trying to understand why my achievements were expected while Grace's were celebrated, why her needs deserved financial support while mine were dismissed." I gestured around us. "But building this life, creating this company with Laura, raising our son, it's helped me realize something important." My parents watched me warily, perhaps sensing that whatever I was about to say wouldn't be what they wanted to hear. "I don't need your approval anymore," I continued. "I don't even want it. What I wanted was your love, freely given, without conditions or comparisons. And I've accepted that it's not something you're capable of providing." My mother's eyes filled with tears, but they seemed more like tears of frustration than genuine remorse. "That's not fair, Hassan. We've always loved you. In your way, perhaps," I acknowledged, "but it wasn't the way I needed to be loved. And now, I have people in my life who love me completely, who celebrate my successes instead of taking them for granted, who support me through challenges instead of expecting me to handle everything alone." Laura squeezed my hand, and I drew strength from her presence. "So here's what I'm proposing," I said, my voice steady. "I'm willing to have a relationship with you, but on new terms. Not as the son seeking approval, but as an adult with boundaries and expectations. I'll review Robert's business proposal. I'll attend family gatherings occasionally, but I won't pretend that the past didn't happen, and I won't expose my son to the kind of conditional love I grew up with." My father's jaw tightened. "You're setting conditions on family relationships. That's not how family works, Hassan." "It's exactly how healthy family works," Laura interjected. "Mutual respect, clear boundaries, and genuine care. Those aren't conditions, they're foundations." My parents stayed for another hour, the conversation moving to safer topics. Grace's pregnancy, changes in their neighborhood, a recent trip they'd taken to Florida. As they prepared to leave, my mother attempted to hug me. I accepted the embrace, but didn't return it with any warmth. "We want to be part of your life again," she whispered. "And your son's life. We're his grandparents, after all." "That's a title you'll need to earn," I replied quietly. "Just like you'll need to earn back my trust." After they left, Laura and I stood in the foyer, watching their car disappear down the driveway. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Lighter," I realized. "Like I finally said what needed to be said, without anger or bitterness, just truth." That evening, as we tucked Noah into bed, I was struck by how different his life was from my childhood. He was surrounded by love that asked nothing in return, by parents who celebrated each small milestone not because it reflected well on us, but because his joy was our joy. In the months that followed, I did review Robert's business plan. It had merit but needed refinement. I connected him with some of my contacts in the automotive industry and eventually made a modest investment in his revised strategy, structured as a proper business deal with clear terms and expectations. My relationship with my parents remained complicated. We had occasional dinners, usually at restaurants to maintain neutral territory. They made efforts, in their limited way, to show interest in my life and work. I maintained firm boundaries, correcting them when they fell into old patterns of dismissal or comparison. With Grace, something unexpected happened. As she prepared for motherhood and faced the reality of financial constraints for the first time in her life, she began to develop a newfound resilience and independence. She returned to her career in interior design, building a client base through hard work rather than social connections. We grew closer, our shared experiences of parenthood creating a bridge that our childhood differences had previously obscured. Through it all, I continued building my life with Laura and Noah, expanding our family 2 years later with the birth of our daughter, Maya. Catalyst thrived, eventually attracting acquisition offers that would have made us billionaires on paper. We chose instead to maintain control, preferring the freedom to run the company according to our values, rather than maximizing short-term profit. The journey from that hurt young man seeking his parents' approval to the person I am today wasn't linear or simple. There were still moments of pain, of old wounds reopened by careless words or thoughtless actions. but those moments grew fewer and less powerful with time. What I learned, through building a successful company, a loving marriage, and a family of my own, was that worthiness isn't something bestowed by parents or proven through achievement. It's inherent, a birthright that no one can take away unless you allow them to. The house by the bay, the thriving business, the financial security, these weren't validations of my worth. They were simply the byproducts of living authentically, of pursuing excellence not to earn love but because it was fulfilling in itself. True success, I discovered, isn't measured in dollars or square footage. It's measured in moments of genuine connection, in the freedom to be fully yourself, in the courage to break destructive patterns and create something better for the next generation. As I watch my children grow, secure in the knowledge that they are loved unconditionally, I find peace in knowing that the cycle of conditional love that shaped my childhood ends with me. In that, perhaps, is the greatest success of all. Have you ever had to set boundaries with family members who couldn't recognize your worth? How did it change your life? Share your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more journeys of personal growth and healing. Remember, sometimes the family we create is more important than the family we're born into. Thank you for listening, and may you find the courage to create the life you truly deserve, surrounded by people who value you for exactly who you are.